around infrastructure, and we'll look forward to hearing his comments. And last and certainly not least is Dr. Guy Filio, familiar to many of us. Guy is a civil engineer, PhD from Texas A&M, more than 25 years of experience in the field of university professor, researcher, consultant, policy advisor. Guy wears many, many hats, not the least of which at the moment, he is an elected councillor for his community back home in the city of Clarence-Rockland, near the city of Ottawa, which gives him some very interesting perspectives on life these days, and is currently project coordinator for the Canadian Infrastructure Report Card, the first report card being developed on the condition of Canada's infrastructure. So, an esteemed group, and without delay, I think, Rise, I'd like to turn it over to you and give us perspectives from the UK, and I know some international issues going on.
Okay, thank you very much, and hopefully you can hear me. I understand that I visually dominate the room, so I'll try not to dominate the discussion too much. Firstly, my apologies for not being able to make it. I'm just returned from a trip to Asia, and on Monday we hold our next meeting of the ISO PC251 committee working on the development of ISO 55000. So I just wasn't able to make it across that many time zones and back in a very short period of time without suffering severe physical problems, I think. I wanted to talk through a little bit today. Hopefully you can see my slides. Are my slides up on the screen now?
We're going to put them on right now. Yes, okay.
Okay, thanks very much.
We got your title slide.
Yeah, that's great. And if you kind of just, I want to give a little bit of background on where we are with the ISO 55000 activity. But firstly, I wanted to talk very briefly about, I guess, the journey to PAS 55 and why we did it in the first place. And I understand you kind of have been introduced to me as a UK perspective, but what I want to try and do is give you a little bit of an international perspective of what's going on in management system frameworks for asset management. So the first slide we should be looking at is titled AM Systems, the Journey. And there's probably one or two clicks on there just to get the build up. But the first beginning of our journey was way back in 2002, when the Institute of Asset Management got together a bunch of infrastructure companies, regulators, government departments, and kind of asked the question, what do you want us to do to help with this very strongly emerging discipline of asset management? And the answer that came back was a strange one. The answer that came back said we want a common language. We want a common language that enables us to talk to different departments in our own organizations about asset management. But we also want a common language so that utilities can talk to railways, railways can talk to manufacturers, manufacturers can talk to public sector asset managers, and so on. And being predominantly a bunch of engineers, our answer to a common language was to write a standard. And we chose to do that through our local standards institution, our national standards body in the UK, BSI. And the reason we chose to do that was largely credibility. They had a fixed process, which meant that we had to demonstrate there was demand. We had to demonstrate that something did not already exist that did this. And it forced us through a degree of public consultation. So there was an element of credibility and confidence that two or three guys hadn't got together in their garage one weekend and written this. The first version of PAS 55 was published in 2004. And then very soon after that, it was apparent that there was quite a lot of international uptake. So the beginning of our journey was UK for sure. But very soon, even by 2005 and 6, we had organizations in Asia and the Netherlands and the USA who were starting to use PAS 55 in its earliest format. Having gone through the development process and then seen it applied in a number of areas, we recognized that there were some things we wanted to do to improve it. I think we also recognize that with an international customer base, if you want to use that phrase, an international group of users, we saw an opportunity to start to collect their thoughts on best practice asset management. So we very much engaged in a review process. We sought to engage more internationally and from a wider collection of industry sectors. So that resulted in the current version of PAS 55, PAS 55 2008, being published in September 2008. That was built up from inputs from some 49 organizations, 10 countries, 15 different industries. And if you can kind of see those pie charts in the bottom left-hand corner of that slide, you can see that less than 50% of the input, even in the current version of PAS 55, is from the UK. There's more than 50% from the rest of the world. And the degree of industry sectors has also increased as well. If we click that onto the next slide, please, slide 3. You should be looking at a map of the world. This is probably getting a little bit out of date now, this slide, but with the advent of ISO 55000, I kind of haven't updated it. This is probably a couple of years old. I used it around about the beginning of the ISO 55000 work. And these were areas globally and in different industry sectors where I was aware that organizations were using PAS 55 to improve the way they did their asset management. And you can see that there's not only a pretty much global uptake there, but also a very diverse range of industry sectors. So PAS 55 was very much becoming almost a de facto standard for asset management, even under the BSI banner. So what we did, and we did this very shortly after the publication of PAS 55 in 2008, was we started to approach ISO to understand how we might take this more international and move it under an ISO banner, which would enable two things, really. One, it would enable us to engage with a more diverse set of organizations internationally in areas of the world where publication under BSI just isn't going to be well appreciated, and also to engage more diversely with industry sectors. And we went through quite a lengthy process with ISO because they're a very large and complex organization with some 176, I think, national standards bodies engaged. But the upshot was, if we click and move on to slide number 4, we formed ISO pt2. For those of you familiar with ISO committees, you may ask why we're not a TC. A TC is a technical committee. A PC is a project committee, so we're kind of a single purpose vehicle. We have a remit to develop 3 international standards, end of. And those 3 international standards will be 55,000, which is an overview, 55,001, which is the actual management system requirements for asset management, and that kind of mirrors the structure of the PAS 55 document, and ISO 55002, which is guidelines on the application of the management system. If we click to move on to slide 5, which is titled ISO 55000, The Journey, you can see on there that this isn't something that happens overnight. I think the ISO process is slow, sometimes it's bureaucratic. To some extent, it's deliberately slow. Our core aim is not to knock out the best document we can as quick as possible. Our aim is to generate consensus amongst all of our participating countries. Now that takes time. That means that we have to go over old arguments again, and sometimes we come out with a new answer because we get new information, and sometimes we come out with the same answer because we reach a level of understanding and consensus amongst our wider group. I could probably update this a little bit more after this week. We're now in the position where our next meeting is on Monday. Excuse me. we have now had a ballot on our committee drafts, which means we move into the next stage of development. And our objective for next week's meeting is to reach the point where we have draft international standards, which again will go out to ballot on quite a long time scale. If we can just move on to slide 6. I wanted to highlight the degree of international participation here. We now have, I think it's 28, and the reason I think it's 28 is we got an email from Chile today saying, please change their position to participating. And I understand they're sending people to the meeting in Prague next week, which is putting things a little bit fine, but we'll be glad to see them. You can see there's a lot of diverse countries in there, and most of those do tend to actively participate as well. We typically have between 50 and 60 delegates turn up at our meetings. Next week's meeting in Prague, we have of the order of 70 delegates registered to attend. And we will have a 5-day meeting, which is usually pretty hard work. They tend to be long days, and we have lots of interesting debates about what asset management is and what it isn't, and how do we capture that into an international standard. I wanted to show you a little bit about where we are. This, if you click, we should move on to slide 7, titled The Process. Formally, we're just at the end of the committee stage. So our second committee draft went out in February. Our various participants have had it for 3 months now. That committee draft was balloted, and last week we got a positive outcome to that ballot, which pretty much means that when we go into Prague, we enter the inquiry stage on Monday, and our aim is to develop draft international standards. And if you click that again, please, and putting that on a longer time scale, typically ISO standards have to work on a 2-year track, a 3-year track, or a 4-year track. It's a fairly fixed program we're required to follow. Again, being predominantly engineers, given a choice of 2